Hello and welcome. I'm your host Tyler here with
Nick.
and you're listening to Makeshift Meeples, where we won't teach you how to play board games, we just talk about them. Nick, what are we playing today?
This week on Makeshift Meeples, 3 Years of War.
3 Years of War is designed by Jay Little and published by the Dietz Foundation. We can thank both Jay Little and Jacob Walker for art. Also, we'd like to thank everyone at Geekway to the West and Protospiel Madison and Minneapolis for playtesting.
3 Years of War is a card-based hand and resource management game. Through cunning card play, players vie for precious resources while making the most out of a desperate situation and increasingly bleak options. The player who best navigates this barren and bitter landscape, minimizes their setbacks along the way, may have what it takes to survive 3 years of war.
Dun, dun, dun! All right, Nick, happy to be back. This week we played 3 Years of War.
Yeah.
And I want to preface this by saying that we originally played with the version 0.1 rules, and that covers most of the same mechanics, right?
So there's a second or third edition of the rules that is on BGG right now. I don't think there were any major differences between them outside of some of the references and some of the tokens that we played with will have different symbols and things on them in the final product.
Mm-hmm. And that means that there may be a little bit of balancing changes too, right?
There may be some small changes to it. So if you are playing a finished copy, months after we record this and have played it, there may be some small differences. Don't fret about that.
Cool. Okay, well, what is 3 Years of War? What's the game about?
So in 3 Years of War, we're all playing
mercenary
kings, essentially.
Barons, I think.
Yeah, barons.
Leaders of men.
Yes, we have our own little kingdoms.
Leaders of top men.
Leaders of top men? What? Now I can just picture everybody wearing top hats. That's not a real thing.
Yeah, the best.
Don't go down that road.
The best.
But yeah, so we all have our own little fiefdoms, and we're trying to be the best fiefdom and survive this war.
Yeah, and the way those resources are represented are through your player board, and you just have a little square that moves the resources up and down.
Yeah, so it's a pretty simple board, but the clear cubes that they have in this version of it, I actually really liked because they're not just straight clear cubes, but you can still see the numbers through them pretty easily, and it was nice. It was actually really easy to use. But yeah, there's only really 4 resources in the game. Gold, soldiers, food, and holdings.
Yeah, I think for some of the cards that get shown through the game, it references cards in hand as well.
Yes.
So those technically getting you points at the end of the game too, the same way the other resources do.
Right.
So I think I would count those maybe, but and cards in hand I think play a huge part in the gameplay. So I would probably count them as a resource as well. Something you have to manage.
Oh, of course, yeah. Technically, you do have a maximum hand size as well, but I don't think that ever even came into effect in our games.
No, but just looking at the player board now, it goes from 1 to 9.
Yep.
And your hand size was from, I guess, 0 to 9. So I think that would be fair to say that's a 5th resource.
Yeah.
And this game was played over, 3 rounds?
Well, 3 years.
3 years.
So the interesting part about this is each year is kind of broken down into the 4 seasons. So you have spring, summer, autumn or fall, and winter. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I really liked about this game is it thematically matches the seasons with kind of like the resources and the events and things you run into, where spring is kind of the most plentiful and like you get the most season cards out of that season. But then as summer comes around, it's still pretty good. As fall comes, there's still a lot of good stuff, but you start to see some issues cropping up. But during the winter, like, things are probably going to be bad.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to just figure out how to mitigate the bad.
Yeah, and that reference by, like, how do you equate good and bad in this game is normally, like, bad stuff will say that if you lose, you get hurt.
Yeah.
Poorly, or the season cards might have these like negative effects on them. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so there might be rats that are eating your grain, or locusts that decide to show up in the middle
of our top men.
Yeah.
Yeah, the The negative effects, I think, are pretty balanced, too, with the positive effects. Because they're all either, like, gain a resource or lose a resource.
Yes.
Or they're symmetrical is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and the other part about it is something that we didn't really talk about much after the game, but I want to bring up. So during the bidding of influence phase, you use season cards that some of those have both good and negative effects on them. Mm-hmm. And then whoever essentially is at the bottom of the order when it comes to that influence will essentially redistribute any of those cards that have effects onto the resources and the season and the resource cards that are available to pick from. So you get this natural balancing as well.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed that mechanic. When you described the rules, it felt like that made the game just sound better. Because normally in a bidding game where you get placement and that placement indicates what choice you get, just coming in last is the worst. But in this situation, the player that's in last gets to distribute how those positive and negative benefits go on the cards we're about to choose.
Correct.
So the best card that looks the greatest could all of a sudden have the worst effects on it because that's just what the player in last got to choose. So yeah, you get to balance those cards. It's not just completely random.
Right.
And I actually think there's a lot of strategy that goes into that too, because I mean we could talk about the strategy in this game. I think 3 Years of War has multiple different layers.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So it's not just the strategy of how I'm going to bid my cards or the strategy of like what resources I'm going to try to keep up high. It's multiple different tiers of importance at different times in the game.
So the other thing that I think is interesting is in the game that we played of this, there were 4 of us.
Yeah, played 4 players.
And I think that every one of us tried multiple different strategies at different times.
Yeah, I can agree. I think that's accurate.
I don't think anybody had one strategy beginning to end. This is going to happen.
So I remember looking at player boards, and I never thought that I would have more men than anybody.
Yeah.
I had like 5 the whole game, but towards the end of the game, everybody started losing men. So that incentivized me to kind of like not worry about the stuff that I had low numbers of, and just kind of push the stuff that I had high numbers of.
Yeah, push your soldiers up.
Push your shoulders up, pull your soldiers up. But yeah, I actually really had fun with this, and so this game has a bidding phase at the very very beginning of the round.
Yep.
Right. And
beginning of every season.
Yeah. So you bid cards equal to. It's actually kind of complicated, so let's not get.
We're not going to get into that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not complicated to play, but
it's complicated to explain.
Yeah, I'm sure a master could explain it quite easily.
Well, especially without any visuals or anything.
We're just not masters. Yeah. But so yeah, you get that you get ranked based on that who wins the bidding phase, and then like Nick said earlier, the loser of the bidding phase, the person that passes first, gets to draw a card, but they also get this token that's I think a misery token, doom token.
Yep.
I think it's doom.
What is the word? It's not doom. It's something else. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's a bad token.
Despair. That's it.
It's a bad token that gives
you with a D.
Negative points at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So they get a really bad effect, but then they get kind of a good effect. But then the person that comes in third gets nothing. The person that comes in second gets 1 victory point. The person that comes in first gets 2 victory points. So there's incentives to go in all spots.
Yeah.
You sometimes you might not really care to be second or first because you don't want to bid the cards.
Yeah.
But maybe those victory points are really pivotal to what you're doing. Or maybe just going first is really pivotal.
Well, there was definitely times that for me it was like, I just don't want the despair.
Yeah.
I don't care about getting the victory points. I just don't want the despair.
Yeah. But after that phase, the choose your card phase, after the players in order choose one of the season cards, they move all the resources on their board according to what the resource cards say. And then there's a reveal of a event card. And those events are different for each season.
Yep.
But they're normally similar. They have kind of like straightforward effects, like the market. You can always spend money to buy stuff.
Yep.
I can't remember
the goods that are available each time might change, but
yeah, I think the board actually symbolizes what the effects are generally about.
So the marketplace has a picture of a coin. It's all about exchanging coins for things. Field of battles when you go to war, so it's all about fighting.
Yeah, having high numbers of men.
Yep.
And killing things.
Yep.
And then
reaping what's sown. You got a picture of the grains, so it's all about harvesting your grains.
And that dirty rat.
That dirty rat. And getting into the winter with enough food to feed your soldiers and everything.
And the last one is bitter months,
which has your holdings, and you gotta have somewhere really sweet to hold up in.
Normally, your holdings have to be greater than another resource.
Some other resource, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I felt like it's kind of foreseeable. I mean, you never know what you're gonna need. What the secondary resource you're going to need is, but you always know that you're going to have either high coins, high men, high food, or high strongholds.
Right.
I mean, it made sense to me, but I can understand where like revealing that card since it's flipped at the end of the round, it can feel kind of bad if like you played the game thinking something was going to happen and you just didn't know.
Yeah.
It. But everybody's kind of under that.
I get that, but there's also ways to mitigate that too, because there is. I can't remember what they call them, scout tokens, essentially.
Yeah.
Where you could look at basically any one of the face-down cards or a face-down resource that another player even has to get that insight, to get that extra information to be prepared for it.
That's like another layer to the strategy here, because you might only care about one specific future card. Actually, I don't know what you could look at with that card, because I only ever looked at these events.
You could look at the events. You could also look at any despair tokens that players had.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or you could look at any face down, the little scrippy guys that were like bonus resources or stuff like that.
The unknown bonus resources. Very
you can basically look at anything that is hidden information in this game.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That was quite good. But that's a perfect lead into something that I really enjoyed about this game was the hidden information.
Yeah.
I think that made everybody's choices not just based upon them, but based upon everybody.
Well, I think it's difficult because in this game, unlike a lot of other games, I don't even know everything that I have.
Sure.
So there's hidden information that I, as a player, have hidden information that I don't even know.
You're talking about the despair
tokens. Despair tokens. I don't know what those are. I know that in this version, they're a number between 1 and 5.
Yeah.
But I don't know what or how many.
That was very swingy, but I just want to preface before we get to the despair tokens, how the hidden information really does play a big role.
Oh, very much so.
In choosing what you do on a turn, because at the end of the game, the only thing you know for sure is that how many victory points people have and how many points you're going to get for having more stuff than other players.
Right.
For having more. So those are really the only real, tangible, known amounts here. And the victory points on the board don't ever go away, I don't think, right?
I don't recall any way for you to lose them once you've gained them.
No, and now the counterbalance to that is, like you were saying, despair, which has huge range, 1 to 5. We thought it was 1 to 3 when we were playing, but it definitely felt
That's on me, because I purposely didn't look at the tokens because I didn't want to have additional information that you guys didn't have.
Oh, I appreciate that. But it definitely changed the way I played, because when you said that the despair tokens were 1 to 3, I assumed...
I didn't think they were that bad either.
Well, I assumed they were going to be terrible at 1 to 3. But they were bigger.
1 to 5, yeah.
But so there's a way you can counteract those, and that was with hope tokens.
Yeah.
They also... I've been corrected frequently. They're not peace tokens, even though they're a dove with olive branch.
But that's
in
hope.
The mouth. It's
hope
peace.
for peace.
What's
Tyler?
the olive branch stand for? Peace, right?
Yeah, but it's
peace.
Hope to end this war.
Well, but they can be counteracted. The misery.
They counteract the despair.
Yeah. So for every peace token you have at the end of the game, the person to your right can choose a despair token that doesn't count.
They have to, yeah. It basically negates a despair token, each one of them.
So it's relatively random, but you can kind of say like, well, okay, I'm going to get despair for a bunch of reasons. Maybe this peace token is worth the 1 or 2 resources or the 5 resources that I gained from this other thing, because 5 points is huge. It could potentially be 5 points, or he could accidentally pick a 1 point.
Yeah.
So it's really random and swingy. I actually I I didn't feel impacted by it very much in the game because I had like 6 peace tokens, and it counteracted everything except for my despair.
Yeah.
One of my despair. But I know that at the end of the game, you and Rich both had...
Yeah, I think I was on the opposite end of it. I don't think I took the hope as seriously as I should have early on. But I also, early in this game, did a good job of limiting my despair. So the issue is, as we got later in the game, there were almost no hope tokens available. And or I was just set into a place where I was low on cards, so I didn't have as much influence, so I couldn't get to those options even.
Yeah.
So it was impossible for me to negate the despair that I was being forced to take because of other choices I made in earlier rounds.
Sure. So it wasn't really on your agenda,
right?
But you didn't really have the chance to later.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I kind of noticed the same thing during the beginning of the rounds. I think the first 2 rounds, I really didn't win a lot of the placement events.
Right.
I didn't win a lot.
The influence.
So I was always 3rd or 4th. And my choices were like between 2 cards, and the worst one was never the one with the peace token on it.
Yeah.
So I just took the one with the peace token on it when I didn't have any despair, and it just ended up being
there was a point where you had like 5 hope and
no despair.
1 despair maybe, and it was like, okay.
Yeah, but it ended up being great.
But I think that gave you a lot more options later in the game too, that it's like, well, I can do this thing that's really good and I get 1 despair, or I do this thing that's just kind of okay.
Yeah, let's talk about the end of the game, because of that, I think that the despair tokens played a huge role in that. I think final scores were like, it was like lowest person had 8 and I had 26.
Which 26? I thought it was 22.
I think it's 26.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I don't know the exact scores, so I'm not going to go over them. But that was the range.
Yep.
But the actual like not the gross scores, not the net scores, were much closer. I think the range was like 26 to like 32.
Are you talking about pre-despair?
Yeah, pre-despair gross
Okay.
scores.
Yeah.
So I felt those numbers actually made sense. When I looked at them, I'm like, that game was close.
Yeah.
But the despair tokens were the swingy thing.
They definitely made the scores a little bit worse.
Well, yeah. They lowered the scores because I had 1 despair token that was -1, and then somebody else might have had 2 despair tokens, but one of them was -5.
Yeah.
So that's like a huge chunk of those points. If you just do the percentage, like 5 points of 36 is, a 6th.
Well, I think I had the most raw renown or victory points.
Yeah.
At like 26 before despair, but then I ended up having like 14 despair or something like that.
It hurt for sure.
So it cut my score almost in half, a little more than in half. So I went from being in first place to being in second to last.
I definitely think that the way the despair tokens are distributed, it could maybe use like I don't think that you need to necessarily get rid of the high numbers, but it felt pretty random when they were just all in a pool. So maybe if the despair tokens were like in a random stack of 2s and 3s, and then another random stack of 3s and 4s, and then a stack of 5s, and you can't take like each one gets more severe as the other stacks go away.
Maybe.
I think maybe that would have been a little more balanced. So passing at the beginning of the game maybe wouldn't be as bad
as passing later on, because you know it's going to cost you more points later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought maybe that would have been at least more foreseeable, because there's so much strategy to this game. It feels kind of bad when you plan everything and the best thing you can possibly do is lose 5 points.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's random.
Part of me likes the randomization of it, but I understand where some people just don't enjoy that part of games.
Yeah.
They want to have the more strategic piece to it, and they want to, at the very least, feel like they're more in control of what they're doing.
For sure. Well, I think this game is awesome.
Yeah.
It's just, it feels bad when you like reveal that random information. You played the game hoping they were 1s, but they were 5s. So it feels like you just couldn't do it. Nothing you did mattered. Like it almost feels futile after you've done it.
Well, I mean, it is a war.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that too. Just the theme of the game.
Yeah.
So 3 Years of War, just like the name indicates, is about war, And it's not just, we're not actually fighting. There's no combat here, per se.
Not really, no.
I mean, it's like resource denial and like gameplay abstraction of fighting.
Well, I think it's more about running the kingdom that is at war.
Yeah. Well, because there's like siege weapons that blow up the citadels, and then there's, you can just like attack dudes, but all the attack is a sword. It says you get to destroy
a unit from somebody else.
Yeah. Or you can steal stuff, right? Send your thieves. But I really thought the game felt very thematic of like the cruel realities of war. If that was the theme.
I think that outside of just going back to the seasons, like outside of spring, you are almost always in summer, autumn, and fall, or summer, autumn, and winter, choosing what doesn't hurt the most.
Yeah.
Like you are definitely in mitigation mode in those seasons.
Yeah.
And there was a couple times, even in the spring, there were like card effects that were just bad enough that you don't want to start out the year dealing with that.
Well, I think if everybody knew how bad despair was, that would be like the driving point of the game.
Yeah.
Either to give your opponents despair by reducing their resources past zero.
Yeah, that's the other way to give people despair. So
and mitigating your own chance for that to happen. I know we didn't really play a lot like that.
Yeah, it was a surprisingly friendly game.
Yeah,
considering
whenever somebody was like, "Oh, I'm going to go past zero," the person might change what they did, just back up a step, which maybe is not how the game's supposed to be played. But at the same time, I think it felt better.
So I think this is one of those games that it weirdly works well either way. Mm-hmm. I think it works well if you have a group of people that are all being nice to each other.
Yeah.
And if you have a group of people that are being extremely cutthroat, because it's one of those, it's good as long as you don't have one person doing one thing and everybody else doing something else.
I would really like to play a game of this where everybody is kind of like rude to each other. Because as long as we're on the same page, I think it'd be fine. And I just think that it would, there's a big pile of despair tokens, and you only ever get to the 5s if all the other not 5s are taken first. Yeah. So I think that once you get there, maybe the points will balance, and you can go negative points in this game. So I thought maybe that would be funny.
There's actually a rule specifically for if all the players are at negative points.
Who's the least negative?
Yeah,
it is easier to be to have a lot of despair than it is to.
Well, I mean, there was a number of times that you easily could have just been handed despair tokens,
easily,
like multiple times in a year,
for sure. Yeah, I had low number of strongholds the entire game. I just didn't have the option to get more.
Yeah,
I couldn't buy more. Whenever I could buy more, I did.
But even then, you were getting like one or two.
Yeah, or for some reason, everybody thought it would be awesome to always put the positive stronghold cards with the negative stronghold cards.
So they just wiped each other out. Yeah.
So that was never really an option for me. But I thought this game felt very thematic, right? Hope and despair. Like resource denial. Mm-hmm. They all sound kind of like war-like terms.
Yeah.
War strategy-like terms. Did this game remind you of any others?
You know, I've been thinking about that. So we played 2 days ago, and I was trying to think if there was any real good analogy kind of game. And I keep struggling to come up with something because there's part of it that's a bidding process. There's part of it that's a drafting process. There's part of it that's choosing which opponents you attack or don't attack, with the resource management stuff, and part of it's just a management game.
Yeah.
So I couldn't think of anything good that kind of has all of those components really in one place.
So I think you're right. The core of 3 Years of War is all about the management, and the bidding and the drafting they're not superfluous to playing the game. They're very impactful. I feel like I'm doing something when I'm playing. But the real impact, like where it matters, is what you do with the resources on your board.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the choice that matters. It's not necessarily what card you get. I mean, that tells you what resource you get. But how those cards play out in the context of gaining free resources, it's really about action economy. Right, you only have one.
It's always about action economy.
It's always about, isn't it? Well, it is, because you only have one thing you can do on each phase, and you had to make that one thing get you more stuff. But it also has to be situationally beneficial.
Well, in this game, it almost always you also have to consider does the thing you're getting offset the thing you're losing?
Yeah, it's got to be beneficial for the situation, because if you get a negative thing, gain 5 despair, or 3. I keep saying 5. It could be a middle road
could
number.
Be a 1.
Could be 1. But yeah, if you gain -1 despair from that thing that gives you more resources in other regards, it may not be worth it.
Well, there were multiple times that like one of the options for the resources to take was like 2 victory points. But what do you know? There's a card on there that has a rat. So you're going to get 2 victory points, but you're going to lose a grain.
Yeah.
In the season that you need grain.
Yeah. Well, the locust actually never felt like a downside. Even though you're losing 2 resources, everybody else loses 1 resource.
Yeah.
So the table is actually
It did definitely feel a little more leveled.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about the locust was there were multiple times that the locust came into play, and I feel like whoever had to play it often chose what they had the most of, because they knew even if they were losing 2, if everybody else is losing 1, they're probably still going to be ahead on that one.
Still be good. If I had to say this reminds me of any game, I would say maybe Grizzled. Not in terms
You brought that up right after we played, and I see what you're trying to say, but I don't know if I can 100% agree with it.
The gameplay mechanics are completely different.
Yeah.
And Grizzled is a game about teamwork.
Yeah.
And 3 Years of War is not a game about teamwork.
It's definitely not teamwork.
But
this is where I have trouble seeing your analogy.
Well, I think the comparison is that you're trying to make the least worst decision at every point of the game.
Okay.
And in Grizzled, like, whatever you do, something bad's going to happen. And in this game, something bad is not always going to happen, but most of the time something will.
I would definitely agree that the very few times that you get only good stuff in this game are so rare. And that, again, like we've said, I think a couple times, you are often choosing or trying to choose what is not the worst option.
For sure. Well, let's rate this game, Nick. How many Holy Grails are you going to give it this week?
You know what? So I really enjoyed this game, and I actually, this is an interesting one for me because I actually played this game with the designer 3 or 4 years ago. So this is the second time I got to play it, and I really enjoyed it both times, far more than I thought I was going to. So I think I'm going to give this an 8.
Okay, an 8. That's pretty high. So I think this 3 Years of War feels very unique. I can't actually think of a game that combines this many mechanics and it plays in this similar way. I mean, resource management game, sure, but I think just because of that uniqueness, if you like this game...
With the influence in the drafts, it's not just resource management all of a sudden.
And I think it can be played fairly quickly if you know what you're doing. So with those things combined, I think it makes for like maybe an 8 if you're playing a quick game, but I don't think this game would be an 8 if you want to play it like for multiple rounds, or by multiple rounds I mean multiple games. Yeah, because if you want to sit down and play a game for 3 hours, this is not it. But I do. And so in that respect, I think maybe it loses.
You could make it a 9-year war.
You could make it a 9-year. We could play extra long phases. That's a lot of shuffling of those big decks. But yeah, so I think if you want to play a long game, it might not be an 8. But I think if you just want to play a quick short game, maybe an hour-long game, it'd probably be.
Yeah, I think our play was just about an hour and change.
Yeah.
And that was with a fair bit of rules looking up and like very double checking things.
It was a lot of fun. The board's easy to read once you know what the symbols mean. And I didn't think that there were any super weird rules except for maybe during the bidding. And that's, I think, once everybody learns it, you'll get into it.
And this was something that when I was teaching the game, I believe I said, this is going to sound weird, but we almost just need to play around and then everybody will get it. And we played one season and everybody was pretty much on page and just knew how to go from there.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, I don't know if it's that I'm one of those people, I have to do a thing to know. Like, I can read the rules and I kind of know, but I have to play it once before I really know how to do it. And I don't know if that was just me pushing that on the group, but I genuinely think that the process that you play is kind of hard to put into words. But once you do it, one time, it just makes sense to
me. Yeah, it makes sense. I had a lot of fun with this game. Thanks for suggesting it, Nick.
Yeah, this was it actually came to us by way of the designer and the guys helping him produce it. So
yep. So I think we're planning on doing an interview with the designer. Yeah. So if anybody listening wants to listen to that, we'll put a link in the description below so that you can check that out and hear from John Little.
Jay Little.
Jay Little.
Come on, buddy. Keep it together here.
All right. It's been a long night.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody have a nice day.
Yeah.
You too, Nick. Thank you for listening to Makeshift Meeples.
You can see more about our upcoming shows on our website, makeshiftmeeples.com, as well as offer us feedback or contact us about games you would like to see on the show.
If you enjoyed the episode, there are a number of ways you can help us keep this thing going.
Share this episode with a friend.
Hit that subscribe button so that you're notified of future episodes.
Like and follow us on social media.
And you can support us on the Patreon and Anchor app.